My new book, Awake, Observe, Shape, Transform, is now available on Amazon, along with the 90-day transformation journal. You'll find a link to these things in the episode description. Also, if you'd like to support this work, there are $10, $15, and $20 Patreon tiers with no locked content, just a way to say I value this. You can also visit the site and check out the growing merch store, shirts, tanks, hats, and learn about one-on-one sessions with me by clicking the About button. And don't forget, the YouTube page has the podcast and binaural beats for meditation, rest, and sleep. Thank you for being here. Let's get started. Welcome to the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. My name is Keith Welsh, and today we're talking about a spiritual relationship that changed history. We're talking about Shams of Tabriz, the fire, the wild one, the spiritual renegade who ignited the soul of Jalal Rumi. I'm sure you've heard of Rumi. He's on coffee mugs, yoga shirts, Pinterest boards. But very few people talk about why his heart exploded into such powerful poetry, why he transformed from a religious scholar into a mystic that was drunk on wine and God. Well, the answer is Shams of Tabriz. And if you've ever felt like what you're doing just isn't working anymore, or you sense that there's something deeper calling you out of your comfort, then Shams isn't just Rumi's teacher. He's also yours. So in this episode, we're going to explore who Shams of Tabriz was, the relationship between Shams and Rumi, the origins and beliefs of Sufism, the spiritual practices of Sufis, and finally, why this story matters to you and why it should matter right now. And this one gets intense because it's about what happens when you allow your soul to burn for God. So let's begin. Shams of Tabriz, the fire that awakened Rumi's soul. This episode is going to begin with an apology from me to you. I can't pronounce many things in this episode that well. And nothing grates on my nerves more than when someone who speaks English only decides to overpronounce words in a language that they don't speak. For instance, burrito. I cannot stand when I hear someone overpronounce burrito or quesadilla, dang quesadilla. One time I made that joke so much in my life that when I tried to order a quesadilla for real, I couldn't remember how to say it. Thanks to, the fuck was that movie? You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so let's get into it. Shams was born sometime in the 12th century in Tabriz, which is now Iran. His full name was Shams al-Din Muhammad, which literally means son of the faith, and not S-O-N, but S-U-N, as in a giant ball of fire, and he lived up to it. This guy wasn't a scholar. He wasn't a cleric. He was what a lot of people would refer to as a mystic dropout. Actually quite similar to someone like Richard Alpert, who later became known as Ram Dass. And if you know Ram Dass's story, then you'll definitely see a lot of similarities. But Shams wandered from place to place, from teacher to teacher, always asking these uncomfortable, annoying questions, ultimately refusing religious conformity. His entire life was a prayer for something real. He didn't want rituals. He didn't want more rules or more intellectual debate. He wanted direct union with the beloved, with God. And he wasn't polite about it. People hated him. They called him arrogant. They said he was a madman because he only had one mission, and that was to burn away everything that was false. And that included your titles, your robes, your fancy lineage. He wanted truth. Now, imagine this man showing up in Konya, where Jalal Rumi was a respected Islamic jurist, a scholar, a family man, a beloved community leader. And Shams, this dusty, wild-looking wanderer, walks up and basically says, "Who are you without your books? That's it. Just that was his whole attitude. Like, okay, so what? But legend has it that Shams asked Rumi a question that completely cracked him open. He asked, who was greater, the Prophet Muhammad or the mystic Bayazid Bastami? Again, pronunciation, I apologize. And Bastami was another ascetic, a Sufi, another mystic. And he was also known as this wild wanderer who sought nothing other than mystical union with God. Now, that question might not sound like a big deal now, but back then, and in some places now, I guess it's blasphemous. Bayazid had once cried out, this is the legend, that he once cried out in ecstasy, "Glory be to me," which Orthodox scholars hated, obviously, but Shams wanted to know. He was serious. Who's greater? Isn't that also the voice of God? Right? Bayazid's voice he was arguing, was like, well, if omnipresence is omnipresence and God is omnipresent, then aren't we all just these instruments, right? It was like Ramdas would say, that we're all just God and drag. So it wasn't about theology, it was about experience. And that's terrifying to people with, all the intellectual knowledge, but no experience. And Rumi knew that this guy Shams had it. And, I've said it 100 times, but it's this Zen saying, right? At the right moment, a leaf falls and you wake up, right? My addition to that is that at the wrong moment, a tree full of leaves falls on your head and nothing happens. This also means that you can't just sit in the forest watching leaves fall and hoping to wake up, because it might not be a falling leaf that does it, right? It could be sitting in traffic. It could be a really painful loss. We don't know what the stimulus is going to be that does the trick. So the field always has to be ready, because the right seed falls into good soil and you can't stop it. You cannot stop it from growing. And that was this question that Shams posed to Rumi. Rumi couldn't help it. And some of you may have had that experience where you encounter that thing that just, it moves you. It pushes the doors open, and you cannot pretend that you don't know what you know now, or that you didn't experience what you experienced, and you can't pretend the answer to the question. It's something that I've posed to people over the years 1,000,000 times when I've said, look, this is usually to somebody who's very faithful. And not that I'm not faithful, but, like Shams, I don't believe in hanging on to any of this shit. So you have to constantly push it, question it, make sure it's real. And the question I would say, all right, is God omnipresent? Well, of course God's omnipresent. Okay, where does God stop and start? Just you explain to me, where does God stop and start? If it's all a mass of vibrating particles, right? You zoom in close enough on a human body and it's not even skin anymore. It's just dots, right? So if God is omnipresent, where does God stop and start? Does God stop just shy of my human form? Stop just shy of neurons and axons and thought and all that? What are we talking about here? So it's a question that doesn't really, it bends the mind, right? It's like maybe a Zen koan is like that, where it doesn't really have a point to it or anything, but what it does is it loosens the mind. It keeps it open, because what happens over time is our mind tightens down on ideas, on things, on concepts, and that default mode network in the brain really gets tight, and the brain stops letting information through, because remember that the brain is it's a filter, right? So once they met, they were inseparable. Rumi abandoned his lectures, his public duties, even his students, and he did it just to be in Shams' presence. The two of them would disappear into these private spiritual retreats for days, talking constantly. People hated it. And Rumi's followers got really jealous. His family didn't understand, right? And so obviously rumors spread. Some said they were lovers. Others said Shams was a fraud. Some say that Shams was actually murdered, possibly by Rumi's own son. But none of that matters to us. What matters is what happened to Rumi's soul, right? After Shams vanished, possibly murdered, who knows? We'll never know exactly, but Rumi was wrecked. But from that grief, he began to write. He wrote thousands and thousands of poems, and these poems are called the Poems of Shams of Tabriz. And in these poems, Rumi becomes Shams. And he speaks with the voice of his teacher. Why? Because they were never two people. They were one soul in two bodies, and that's the secret. What Shams awakened in Rumi wasn't just a friendship. It was his own soul. Say that again. Shams awakened his soul within Rumi, and Rumi's soul, vice versa. It was all one thing. That wild, untamed, ecstatic part of himself that longed for God, but had been buried under status and safety and religion. Shams didn't give Rumi anything new. He just lit the match and walked off. And about like this desire for Rumi to be in Shams's presence. I've been around teachers that I just think are pure love or whatever, and other people around them, they just don't get it. So it's a very personal thing. It's like a synchronicity. It's like a paranormal experience. It's deeply personal. And, there's a word in Sanskrit called darshan. And darshan is when you're just in the presence of a deity or a holy person or something, and it's to be seen by them, and you're seeing them. There's some sort of a spiritual exchange there, and that's what Rumi was getting from Shams. Because think about it, if you've ever read Rumi's work, it's so special. One of the first books I ever stole was a Rumi book, and I still have it. And I can crack it open at any point and just read any piece of it, and just, it's like it's new all over again. So what is Sufism? I'm going to do my best to explain it, but Sufism is this mystical tradition that came out of Persia, the broader Middle East, but it was about direct experience with the divine, right? There's no rigid law, no hierarchy, and its aim isn't to increase belief or just to have belief the way, a lot of religions are, that you just believe and you have faith, but it's about an inner transformation. It's about an awakening of unity with the infinite, which is almost this non-dualistic path that branched out of Islam. So the word Sufi is generally traced to the Arabic suf, meaning wool, since early mystics were known for their rough woolen garments. And that symbolized the simplicity and renunciation of their path. Some traditions also connect it to Safa, which means purity, or even the Greek Sophia, which means wisdom. Whatever it is, whatever its linguistic root is, the word came to signify these people that were devoted to stripping away excess and seeking truth directly. It's very interesting because when I think about that, that was the belief around the Buddha, that Buddha was an incarnation of Krishna that came to strip religion away of all of the pomp and circumstance. Some people believe that Buddha incarnated, or Krishna incarnated as Buddha in order to draw ignorant people out of religion. So there's some similarities there. So references to Sufis starts to appear in Arabic text from the late 18th century. They describe small groups of ascetics in Iraq, Persia, Central Asia, and these ascetics rejected material wealth. They rejected ambition, and by the 19th century, figures like Bayazid Bastami had become known for radical mystical experiences, and not talking about obedience to law, but of ecstatic union with God. So the foundations of Sufism are very eclectic. It absorbed a lot of Persian mysticism and Zoroastrian cosmology, right? Zoroastrianism, Zoroastrian cosmology, I guess how you'd say it. Napoleon, Jesus, these words. I have marbles in my mouth. Greek philosophy, but I'd also collected some of the Christian and Gnostic asceticism and even these kind of echoes of Indian spiritual traditions. That all this stuff kind of got carried along these trade routes. It's why they believe Jesus spent time, in these areas due to, Joseph of Arimathea's standing in the tin industry. It's a whole other fucking thing. But this kind of created a tradition that was less concerned with all the external authority and more concerned with experience. So think about that. It's an entire spiritual path based on the idea that wisdom frees you and morality binds you, right? What we talked about before. You see it in all of these traditions. You see it in a lot of things where you have a very structured, hierarchical system of belief with all these rules and all these things, and it's a fantastic scaffolding. But then a few people start to have direct experience, and the direct experience kind of doesn't fit inside of the framework, right? So people break out of it, and that's definitely what Shams did. That's definitely what Rumi did. So because of its understanding of the world of spirituality, Sufism often placed itself at odds with all of the orthodoxy of Islam. Where the jurists of Islam saw law, the mystics just saw love. Where authority demanded obedience, the Sufis sought union, right? So for Bastami and those like him, the path was never about serving a hierarchy, but about becoming utterly transparent to the real with a capital R until nothing remained but the one. Right. It reminds me of the quote from Father Thomas Keating that I've shared with you guys before, and I might screw it up a little bit, but it's a quote he gives at the end of a documentary in the early 2000s called One. But he says something to the effect that step one of the spiritual journey is the recognition that there is a higher power, an other with a capital O. The second part of the journey is that you try to become the other, still a capital O. And then the third part of the journey is that you realize that there is no other. You and the other have been one, always have been, always will be. You just think that you're not. The operative word there is think. The thinking mind with the ego and all that, reality testing, separates things. So it's like when you drop into these systems and you let go of the thinking mind, you let go of the hierarchy, you let go of all this stuff, you start to have a direct experience. So let's talk about some of the rituals. So there's zikr or dhikr. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. I'm pretty sure I am. But that means the remembrance of God. Repeating divine names aloud or silently, sometimes until the ego dissolves into repetition. Now remember, there was a lot of Indian philosophy and Indian ritual that made its way, or Indian ideas, religious ideas that made its way into Sufism. So right there you have japa, right? Sama meant listening. So that was poetry and music, not for entertainment, but for devotional purposes. The soul expressing its longing for union, for music, poetry, all of this stuff was a vehicle for ecstasy, right? That's what the whirling dervishes are, right? It wasn't just spinning around. It was, a moving meditation where every motion had this symbolic meaning, and it was a practice of merging heaven and earth. Think about that. Like, Google the whirling dervishes and watch it. It's crazy. And again, kirtan, that's, you see all of these things start to make an appearance. So fana, or annihilation of the self. This was the radical dissolution of the separate, quote unquote, I, right, into the infinite Dharmakaya in Buddhism, source, Param Atman, Brahma, whatever, this is what Ramana Maharshi's thing was. And what's beautiful is that they're not just rituals, right? Like everything else, They are a technology. They change you. They strip you of identity and control and leave behind only the presence, right? I have had direct experiences with chanting, with getting closer to God through poetry, through expressing those ideas in that way. Music is a big reason why I'm here, right? That band that I've mentioned a few times, Shelter, is why I'm here talking to you right now. So it's again, it's a technology for the soul to awaken, or more so for the human incarnation to realize its own divinity and realize its connection to God and its identity as Atman, or soul. So anyway, you'll find Sufis all over the world, and though they've been often persecuted, right? In some Islamic countries, their practices are completely banned or restricted. I know it's hard to believe. But in Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, North Africa, and even places in the West, that Sufism, it lives on. It's still around. I had a friend whose dad was a Sufi. I know in the 70s, there was a guy named Sufi Sam, and he was one of Ram Dass's compatriots. I knew folks that used to do Sufi dance circles in the woods in Gainesville, Florida. So it's not just in mosques or formal gatherings, right? You'll find it in yoga studios, all right? Quiet corners in the recovery world, right? And in the hearts of people like you and me who are tired of spiritual dogma and just want to feel something real. They want to experience something that's actual, right? They want direct, ecstatic experience. Sufism isn't about converting. It's about uncovering, I guess you could say. It's about peeling back the layers, right? All the false identity stuff until there's just love, right? And it's not lustful love. It's not desirous love. It's just it's there, right? So yeah, it's alive. And if you're hearing this episode, maybe there's a reason for that, right? Go get a Rumi book, read some poems. Now let's try to bring this all into, bring it all home because again, this isn't really meant to be a history lesson. This is about your soul. You might be Rumi, right? You might be the person who's been doing everything right. You've been showing up, you're being responsible, you're following the rules, but somewhere deep down, you're starving. You're aching for something raw, something real, something unnameable. Or maybe you're Shams. Maybe you're the wild one. Maybe you're the misfit. Maybe you're the person that doesn't fit into any system. The person who's been rejected by every spiritual community because you asked too many questions. I've been known to ask a lot of questions. I was never rejected from a community. But there have been times we've asked people to leave. She wasn't asking uncomfortable questions, but she also isn't Shams. But either way, they have what you can have. Shams and Rumi, that is. You can have these things, right? It doesn't cost anything. I mean, I guess it could cost your comfort, cost your ego. It costs the version of yourself that you think is you, right? I once lost a friend over that. This person was involved in what's called landmark training, which is like gratitude training. It's one of those self-improvement things. And, there's paid tiers. I was deep in the game with Lama Losan, and she was trying to get me going. I was like, nah, I'm good. I mean, I kind of have a thing, and it's free. So I don't know. But once that Shams of Tabriz shows up in your life, right? And they show up in the form of a teacher, heartbreak, loss, whatever, right? You can't go back to sleep. Keeps you awake. You can try to forget. You can try to forget you didn't have the experience, but it's not going away. And it might be painful, but that's kind of what you've been asking for. So I'm going to leave you with this. Shams didn't give Rumi God. He didn't have that power. That's not the role of the guru. But he reflected God so clearly, so fiercely, so beautifully that Rumi couldn't help but remember who he was. That's what the teacher does. And that's what I want this work to be for you. I want it to wake you up, get you thinking, make you look up a few things. You know? That's what I want you to do for somebody else. Share an idea. Maybe I say something crazy, do a little research, like, oh my God, it's real. And you share it with somebody else, right? Not a guru, not a savior, but a mirror. This stuff is a mirror, right? It's a reminder. In the words of one of my old spiritual teachers, I want to be your spiritual friend. Shanti used to say, I'm your spiritual friend. I'm not your teacher. I'm not your guru. I'm your spiritual friend. And, that's what Shams was to Rumi, right? That's what, that's what he did, and it's so interesting. Like, I've had these teachers over the years that were like Shams in my life. People that the first time I met Lama Losan, well, the first time I went to a Dharma teaching, I hated it, but something made me go back, and I hope you guys find that thing. So I love you. Stay awake. Thank you. If the infinite spark of being has brought you any value, consider supporting the work. And you can do that by checking out Awake and the 90-Day Transformation Journal, both now available on Amazon. The links are in the description. If you want to support this work on a monthly basis, there are $10, $15, and $20 Patreon tiers that have no locked content yet, just support. You can also swing by the website, check out the merch store, learn more about working with me one-on-one, and as always, the YouTube page has full episodes as well as binaural beats to help you with your practice. So I'll see you next week. Thank you, and I love you.